splice them together or something.
Oh, you're gonna just close it?
Yeah, I'll just close the outro. I feel bad for it. So sorry guys, it did get cut. We went on for like an hour 15 is what it was. And the camera stopped, my phone stopped at 27 minutes and 11 seconds. So that's all we have recorded on the whole conversation, which is kind of sad. I don't know where it ended. I'll have to go through and see where it ended and stuff. I'm sorry guys, I'm trying to work that out. I'll work it out to where maybe we can get longer if we need it to be longer, or we might keep it shorter and figure out and just break it into 15-minute increments or whatever or something, and then I can splice them together and stuff.
Yeah, either way, like, I mean,
yeah.
God's, grace, He allows us to make mistakes, and He comes. Closing note on the Jonah thing.
I don't know if that made it to the video.
We don't know if Jonah.
I don't know if the Jonah.
But if
it did.
Jonah and all his failures, all his failures. He goes and he gets swallowed by a whale. He was in the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. Jesus later says that the Son of Man, the only sign you're going to see is the sign of Jonah, as the Son of Man will be in, which he's talking about himself, will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights.
Right.
So the failure and the sin of Jonah became a prophecy that Jesus used to talk about himself.
Yeah, like that was.
Ain't that crazy?
Yeah,
like our own sin, our own failure.
Can be a prophecy later on in life that can encourage and something.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I hope you guys like it. I'm sorry I got cut short. I do feel bad about that. But God bless you all. God loves you. And I'll have to catch you guys around. Thanks, Nate, for coming on.
Yeah.
And I'll work on making it better, guys. So, all right. God bless you all. Take care. Well, I guess welcome back, guys, to episode 2. This is a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this one here. I think I've been thinking a little bit and doing some studying on grace and stuff, but I'd like to introduce you first to my good friend Nate Schwarter here. You help with the youth group in that church that you go to, and that's really cool and stuff. So,
thanks for having me, Nate. I'm excited too about this episode. I've never been on a podcast before, so this is pretty cool. I do love talking about these conversations because I feel like it's a big part of everyone's life. Is overcoming and the grace of God, and how the grace of God gives us strength in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of practical things that we can talk about today and hopefully inspire someone to reach out in faith to God for His grace.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the guys I was listening to, he was talking a lot about kind of the way I grew up thinking about grace, which was more like grace was for the forgiveness of sins, and like that's when you needed grace kind of thing. And I like how you right off the bat said overcoming something, and you were saying like with grace, using grace to overcome something. I thought that was different hearing that right off the bat, considering like I always had the thought that for me when it's that the grace is I need grace when I sin, when I struggle with something. And if I mess up on the area, that's when I'm like, I go to God and He gives me grace and forgives me.
Yeah.
But not thinking about grace as strength potentially and overcome something. So I'll let you go from there.
So I mean, we talk about grace. I mean, I think a lot of things come to mind. I think traditionally the word grace, would be explained as the unmerited favor of God, so something we don't deserve, but God in His mercy gives us this thing that we don't deserve. And I think that there's so many explanations for grace. I think we use it, hey, would you say grace? That's saying, would you have a prayer? So like, what is the real definition of grace? I think it's kind of like, what is the real definition of the gospel? Like we could be talking all day about grace. We talk all day about the gospel. Yeah, it's going to be deep.
Yeah,
it's going to be good.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect in any way. And I'm more than happy to learn a thing or two, or maybe have my whole world view change. We'll see what happens and stuff. So I don't know.
Whatever the case, the coffee is really good.
It is very good. Thank you for the coffee. Yeah, welcome. I was very happy about that. Yeah, very tasty. So how would you define grace? Like, I know you were saying it's put in different ways where you could say, hey, do you want to say grace for the food, or even how you're saying overcoming something with grace. How would you see grace most defined in your life? That I just thought of that. I really like that question now.
That's a really good question.
That's like such a math question. I love it.
That's awesome. That's interesting that you said that, because I was thinking too of the same thing, like how is grace working in my life, and I guess I would like to tell a story. I think that would really, I think it's the viewpoint that I have about grace, and it's the viewpoint that really I have about who God is. And I think so many of us could tell stories like this, but when I was 19 years old, I had a real experience with God. So many times throughout my childhood and life, like I experienced God's goodness, or you could say God's grace in my life, and miraculously saving me from near-death experiences. And I always looked at the verse that Jesus said, "For God so loved the world that He sent His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life." Right? For God so loved the world. I understand. I believe that God loves the world, but I didn't believe that God so loved Nate Troyer, right? Or God so loved Nate McGee. Like when it became really personal to me, and I wouldn't have said this like out loud, but in the subconscious of my heart, I didn't really believe that. I believe that God loves us as a whole, but like, would God die for me? Would God bring grace for me?
Right.
And so at 19 years old, I really enjoyed hunting. Everyone around in my community, they loved hunting. It's come November. I mean, that's what everyone was talking about.
Right.
And so I think that's changed a lot in our community here. But I was out shooting my muzzleloader, getting ready for. This had been a little before November, so I was getting ready for muzzleloader season. I was shooting my muzzleloader. I was trying to get it zeroed in, and I got so tired of cleaning my muzzleloader. I had some friends that were talking about using rifle powder instead of muzzleloader powder, instead of black powder in your just regular black powder muzzleloader. And so I talked to them. How did they do it? And I started doing what they were doing, and I was so blown away. It worked so good. Like all of a sudden I wasn't having to clean my gun. Instead of every 3 shots having to clean my gun, I was shooting, and like getting it really zeroed in.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, okay, this is great, And I think like with black powder, I think you use like 100 grains typically of black powder, and here I was using like I think 25 of rifle powder. And so I thought, yeah, I'm being really safe, not using much, and it was that night, and so I had a light set up on my target, and I was backed off probably 70, 80 yards. Had my gun leaning on the hood of the car, and I was shooting. And I can remember like it was yesterday almost, like I pulled, shot, the perfect shot, and like everything just blew up in my face. And I was like, okay, I'm dead. It's like, what's gonna happen? Nothing happened. I was like, okay, open my eyes. My ears are ringing like crazy. And I start like, okay, wait, I have hands. Everything's like numb, but like I have hands. Okay, hopefully someone called the chopper,
Yeah.
And I, as the seconds went by, I all of a sudden realized that nothing was wrong with me. And I see my gun laying there and peeled back like a banana. It looks like a banana. I still have the barrel. peel back like a banana. There's big holes in the top of the hood of my car. And I step back and I'm looking at that, and like my whole world just like crashed in. Like my whole worldview just crashed in. Like I just remember being like, oh, I'm an idiot, you know, and like everyone's gonna think I'm an idiot. Everyone's gonna know I'm an idiot, you know, and like all of this, like, okay, I wanted to be like this good hunter, and here I am, made the stupidest mistake. I would rather die than have to live with this embarrassment of having blown the hood of my car up and destroyed my muzzleloader. And at the same time, I'm like, I'm alive. Like, what in the world? I should be at least going, you know, on the way to the yard.
Right.
And I walked into the house. I looked in the mirror. Everything was okay. I think at that moment, my mom came in. She's like, "Are you okay?" She said, "I felt like God told me to pray for you." I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm good. Fine." And I went outside and I cried for like the first time in probably like 5 years, because like I felt an emotion that I never had. Like, I wasn't an emotional person. I as a young like 10-year-old, I had a problem with just like crying for a dumb reason, and then people would call me like a crybaby, and so I was like, okay, I just shut all my emotions off, and I would never cry. I just didn't have any emotions. I remember people died, and I didn't care. There was no emotion there, but I went outside, looked up at the stars, and I cried, and it's like incredible.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And that, I think that began a journey in my life that I would say that I've been on ever since that moment. I think that moment was a turning point for me in such a dramatic way.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I know. I think I've heard a little bit of that story before, but like that's really cool.
Yeah, I've told that story a lot, you know, to a lot of people, and I know it doesn't probably impact them as much as it does me, you know. But
yeah.
I think there's more stories like that, like then we want to, you know. I think a lot of us have had those same experiences, and maybe it didn't take something that dramatic to show you the same thing, but I've been through, like, I've seen crazy things. I've fallen from crazy heights and stuff, but something about that experience really was like, there's no, you know, like I couldn't deny. Like the next year, a piece of the scope came out of a tree in an ice storm. This was like laying on top of the snow. Like, oh, so that was stuck somewhere up in the tree, and it just came down. And like, I mean, my head was right up against the explosion.
The scope and everything, yeah.
Yeah, I can't explain it, you know.
Wow.
So I did get a little bit of shrapnel in my eye, and he was bugging me a little bit. So I went to the eye doctor, and he like pulled out a couple little pieces of shrapnel, and he wondered, it's like, what is this stuff on your? He's like, he zoomed in on the microscope, and it was like all over. It says all over your face. And I was like, really? What in the world? And I did not tell him. He kept wondering. And I was like, nah. I said, I haven't shoot my muzzleloader. I didn't tell him that it blew up.
Wow, something that stood out to me in that story too is your mom checking on you, making sure you're okay, but also then saying that she felt like she had prayed for you. I've found being out here,
like she didn't hear anything, like she didn't know anything, you know.
Yeah, and I found that the times I've been out here in Tennessee and stuff is I'm finding more and more times that like I'll see God work that way, where He'll put it on someone's heart to pray for someone, and just like the middle of the night or whatever, and then something just totally changes. Like you just look at it, and you're like, that could have been just like a terrible experience, but like because God was over there going, why don't you pray for this person? And they kind of thought about it, and like it's like He waited on it, he didn't do it, or it didn't, you know, like helped. It basically miraculously stepped in and changed it the way it was supposed to, because like that gun blowing up, I don't think you should be here because of the gun blowing up and stuff, but obviously God had other plans. I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool to see that yeah.
I think, and this is interesting, just a side note on prayer there, is that I think God presents himself through prayer. I don't think God does anything because of the free will he's given man. I don't think he does anything outside of that free will. And so he actually, I'm not saying he never does this, but he doesn't actually come into our lives and change situations unless someone has prayed for that situation. That's, I mean, it's wild, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's fully put to words, but I've thought for a while, more recently. But I think I get that some, and I think I'm kind of on, like, I wouldn't necessarily say a journey of trying to understand that, but I think I'm on a path that, like, I'm seeing things kind of like that change, where, like, even what you had said just about prayer, where you're saying, like, because obviously, like, part of me goes, I don't want to say God limits himself through prayer or whatever, but at the same time, he does give us free will, and that's very important to him. And I know that with that, it's not that we're putting him in a box as much as he has created something and he respects it and says, no, because I've created free will, I won't, say force change something on someone and stuff. Even though there are times that, like, that stuff like that kind of miraculously just changes or happens or something.
Well, I don't know that I wouldn't say he created free will. I think God created man in his own image. Right. And so because he created us in his image, he doesn't want to exploit that image. And so because he created us in that image to think, to will, and to do, he can't exploit that by changing our will and changing our actions. I'm not saying he can't and won't, but I really don't think he does typically. Because he is also God, so he can do what he wants to do.
Right.
But because of that nature because he made us in his own image, he wants us to allow us to experience the outcome of our actions. Right? And I think this is where grace really comes in strong if we understand this. I don't know if you're ready to dig in a little more, but I've got a verse that we could, I think.
I'd love to. I'm going to peek at the camera and see if it's still rolling. I just want to make sure. I mean, that would suck if we start losing footage. I know that happened when we got cut short on the last one.
That would be too bad. Had to redo
It's
that.
still going.
All right.
We're good.
You just cut that out, or you just
This section here? I might just leave that. I don't really care.
Right.
It's just me checking on the camera.
Right. Okay.
I'm using a phone, so it's not like the most
It's gonna be good.
type thing. So I'll just excited to see what happens.
Timothy, turn to, I think it's Titus chapter 2 and verse 12.
First Titus?
I think they went to Titus. Yeah.
Sorry, I saw it. Yeah, and I was like, Titus? And I was like, wait, my bad. I was like, that's Timothy. There's Titus. First Titus chapter. Titus
To 11.
11.
2:11.
Keeps it first. Okay.
So this is a really interesting verse, and I think it is one of the most conclusive verses. There's probably more, but it talks about God's grace giving us the self-control or the ability to live godly, right? God's grace being that, right? It says, "For the grace of God has appeared, that offers salvation to all people. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled and upright and godly lives in this present age," right? So the grace of God has appeared, right? So, I mean, I think that a lot of times we would like to think the opposite. Oh, it's the judgment of God that's going to give me the strength to live right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I think so, yeah.
Like, okay, I'm going to back up to my story a little bit. During this time of my life, I was struggling with sin. I was not living godly, and it wasn't like I was just going after sin. I was too weak to overcome it. And so, like, I think in our human nature, we would say, man, you just needed you needed a good wake up, right? Like, you should have had that thing blow up your face. You sit in the hospital for, 2 years and maybe lose your vision. But the grace of God, it says, has appeared, and it teaches us to live godly and to say no to worldly passions and to live self-controlled.
Right.
And how did God's grace give me the power to live upright life after that? Fast forward a few weeks later, I was actually struggling more than ever with immoral thoughts mostly, and I was struggling more than ever, and I needed, like, I would cry out to God every time, and God, I was like, God, like, what's wrong with me? I want to do better. I don't want to mess up. I want to do what's right. I want to live right. And God began to do work in my life. And through the course of a week in a Bible school, I came to the point where I really felt like I hadn't surrendered my life, or I wasn't sure if I'd surrendered my life completely to Him. And I went to a brother there that was teaching, and I said, "Hey, how do I know if I've really surrendered my life to you, to God?"
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he asked me some questions. Have you given up girls? And I said, "Yeah, I think so." Like, it wasn't like I'm like, it's like in my will, I wanted to live right. I wanted to do what's right, but like I had no power, no strength to actually do it. And he told me, he looked me in the face, and he said, "Hey, if you really care, you need God to tell you that. Have you surrendered all to Him? You need God to respond to you, not me." He said, "It doesn't matter if it takes up to in the morning. You need to go get alone with God and speak to Him." And I was like, "Okay, let's go." But like, what gave me that inertia? What gave me the energy to go do that and go seek God out? I was sick and tired of my life.
Right.
I was sick and tired of falling, getting back up, falling, getting back up, pretending everything's okay. Right? And I was tired of that life. And so when I walked into the woods that night to try to find some alone space, alone time, I started crying out aloud to God and saying, "God, I don't want to go home and live this struggle anymore. I'm done with it. I'm done with falling and getting back up and falling, getting back up again.
Right.
I want power. I'm done with this." And I said, "Lord, I give you my feet, my legs," and I just started naming my whole body off like that. And I got to my hands, and I was like, "God, do I give you my hands?" Because like, I remember the times of sitting inside in a worship service, and this feeling like God just want just raise your hands and worship, right?
Right.
And like I couldn't do it. Like I was too afraid. I had this fear, man.
Yeah.
And like it's a lot more common to do it now than it was then.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah.
It's like you'd almost be the weird one now. Like, "Hey, what you doing? Just sitting there like that?" Now we're all just we're going.
Yeah.
Right. But at that time it was a bit weird to me.
Right.
And so I was like, "God, I don't know if I can do that."
You're like, "Please no."
No, please no,
don't.
please no.
That's the one thing.
And then I was like, okay, yes, and I kind of just like buried that one. I was like, "All right, I give it to you, right?" And I knew I didn't. And then I kept going. I said, "I give you my mouth." I was like, "Yeah, nah, not doing that. There's no way I'm gonna say whatever you want me to say. There's no way I'm gonna like be talking to people."
Yeah.
Because I had this real identity in being a good guy and not being a like missionary / like holy roller.
Right. Yeah. I guess more of an idea of doing good works and good things, like for people or with people,
Yeah.
or kind of like even like say going out on a mission trip when you feel like you wanted to, versus if God was saying, hey, I want you to go speak to that person at that gas station pump right there, and I want you to go talk to them. And then you're like, because you have the ability to say, no, God, I'm not doing that. Jonah did. And Jonah eventually learned otherwise that he was supposed to. But I mean, like, you know, you still have the ability to say no.
That's a good story to talk about. Let's get on.
That's a good one. But I think that's still something. I think that's really cool that that you even sat and acknowledged the fact that you were like, I don't really like. Do I give you my mouth? Like, do I want to, like, if you told me to go say something, do I go say it? I get that. Like, it's a scary thought. I definitely know that thought. And so sorry guys, it did get cut. We went on for like an hour 15 is what it was. And the camera stopped, my phone stopped at 27 minutes and 11 seconds, so that's all we have recorded on the whole conversation, which is kind of sad. I don't know where it ended. I'll have to go through and see where it ended and stuff. I'm sorry guys, I'm trying to work that out. I'll work it out to where maybe we can get longer if we need it to be longer, or we might keep it shorter and figure out and just break it into 15-minute increments or whatever or something, and then I can splice them together and stuff.
Yeah, either way, like, I mean, God's, grace, He allows us to make mistakes, and He comes. Closing note on the Jonah thing.
I don't know if that made it to the video.
We don't know if Jonah.
I don't know if the Jonah
thing
thing
did. Jonah and all his failures, he goes and he gets swallowed by a whale. He was in the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. Jesus later says that the Son of Man, the only sign you're going to see is the sign of Jonah, as the Son of Man will be in, which he's talking about himself, will be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights.
Right.
So the failure and the sin of Jonah became a prophecy that Jesus used to talk about himself.
Yeah, like that was.
Ain't that crazy?
Yeah,
like our own sin, our own failure.
Can be a prophecy later on in life that can encourage and something.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I hope you guys like it. I'm sorry I got cut short. I do feel bad about that. But God bless you all. God loves you. And I'll have to catch you guys around. Thanks, Nate, for coming on.
Yeah.
And I'll work on making it better, guys. So, all right. God bless you all.
Take care.